Hello friend, and welcome to Science for Sleep. Did you know a very young kitten can sleep close to 22 hours a day? That means in the earliest part of life, a kitten may spend almost the entire day asleep, waking only in short little windows to nurse, feel warmth, and press close to the mother. Many kittens also seem to have blue eyes at first, but that is usually not their final eye color. The blue look often appears because pigment in the iris is not fully active yet, and the more permanent eye color begins showing more clearly later. There is also a quiet rule in newborn kitten care that surprises many people. If a kitten is too cold, warming comes before feeding, because a cold kitten may not be able to digest food properly. And one of the most familiar cat behaviors of all, kneading, likely begins in kittenhood as a nursing behavior, helping stimulate milk flow while the kitten feeds. When most people picture a kitten, they picture a tiny cat, a softer cat, a rounder cat, a smaller and clumsier version of the animal they already know. But a kitten is not simply an adult cat in miniature. A kitten is its own life stage, with its own rules, its own needs, and its own remarkable pace of change. In just a matter of weeks, a kitten moves from near total dependence to the first signs of balance, play, curiosity, and independence. In other words, kittenhood is not just a cute beginning. It is one of the fastest and most delicate periods in the life of a cat. Biologically, the domestic cat is a mammal in the order Carnivora and the family Felidae. And when we say kitten, we usually mean the juvenile life stage of that animal. In broad terms, kittenhood lasts from birth to about 1 year of age, even though the most dramatic changes happen much earlier, especially in the first weeks and months. That longer definition matters because kittenhood is not one simple block of time. It is a sequence. Different body systems mature at different speeds, and each stage has its own feel. This is why kittenhood is often divided into smaller chapters. There is the neonatal phase, which covers the earliest days and roughly the first 2 weeks. Then comes a transitional period, when the senses begin opening and movement starts becoming a little more purposeful. After that comes a sensitive window for socialization, when the kitten becomes more aware of the world and early experiences can shape comfort, confidence, and behavior later on. Then beyond that, there is the broader juvenile period, where the kitten is no longer quite a newborn, but not yet an adult either. These phases matter because they remind us that kittenhood is a process of systems waking up one by one. Eyes, ears, teeth, balance, digestion, sleep rhythms, and social behavior all come online on slightly different clocks. One of the most important words for understanding a kitten is altricial. It is a scientific word, but the idea is simple. An altricial animal is born unfinished. Unlike animals that arrive already able to stand, follow the mother, or move with some confidence, kittens arrive in a much more dependent state. They need help with warmth. They need milk. They need protection. In the beginning, they also need the mother for things as basic as stimulation for elimination. Their early life depends on care, contact, and timing. So when we look at a kitten, we are looking at a life form built around gradual arrival. Not everything is ready at once. Nearly everything is still becoming itself. That unfinished quality is part of what makes kittens so fascinating to watch. Their story is a story of rapid change. Sleep shifts, sight sharpens, ears begin to open the world. Limbs that first seem weak and uncertain begin to steady. Teeth appear. Play becomes more complex. Food changes. The body lengthens. The round little face begins, very slowly, to hint at the shape of the adult cat to come. In a very short span of time, a kitten changes in almost every visible way. This is why it helps to think of kittenhood not as a single identity, but as a moving state. A kitten at 2 days old is living in a very different body from a kitten at 2 weeks. And a kitten at 2 weeks is living in a very different body from one at 2 months. The animal may look, at a glance, like the same tiny creature. But under that soft fur, entire systems are shifting into place. It is almost like watching a slow biological sunrise, where one feature after another begins to glow into function. And that is where our journey really begins. Because if a kitten is not simply a small cat, then the first question is this: what is it like to begin life in such an unfinished form? What does the world feel like when sight is still closed, hearing is still dim, movement is still uncertain, and almost everything depends on warmth, milk, and sleep? That is where we go next, into the first quiet hours and days of kitten life, where nearly everything is still waiting to come online. In the first hours of life, a kitten is so small and unfinished that it can hardly be understood as the animal it will one day become. A newborn kitten is usually only around 90 to 110 grams, which means many of them weigh less than a small apple. The body is there, the fur is there, the tiny paws are there, but almost everything about that body is still in an early state. A newborn kitten does not arrive ready to explore the world. It arrives needing to be carried through the beginning of it. The eyes are closed, the ears are folded, and hearing is still very limited. The legs can move, but not in a strong or coordinated way. A newborn kitten cannot stand and walk across a room. It can only wriggle, press, and crawl in short, weak movements. Even those movements are not really about exploration yet. They are about reaching warmth, reaching milk, and staying close to the mother and litter mates. At this stage, life is very local. The world is not a room or a house or a garden. The world is the warm surface under the body, the smell of the mother, the softness of nearby fur, and the place where milk can be found. One of the most important facts about a newborn kitten is that it cannot regulate body temperature well. Older cats can shift around, curl up, stretch out, and use their own bodies to manage heat much more effectively. A newborn kitten cannot do that very well yet. Warmth is not just comforting. It is necessary. Without enough warmth, the kitten becomes weak very quickly. This is part of why newborn kittens spend so much time pressed into the mother or piled against litter mates. That close contact is not simply affectionate, it is practical. Their small bodies lose heat quickly, and shared warmth helps keep them stable. Because so much of the body is still developing, the newborn kitten also depends on the mother in other quiet ways people do not always think about. Very young kittens cannot fully manage elimination on their own. The mother usually stimulates this by licking them. So even basic body functions are still tied to care. A newborn kitten is not just dependent for food. It is dependent for a whole chain of everyday survival tasks. And yet, even in this unfinished state, the kitten is not disconnected from life around it. It already has ways of finding what matters most. Smell is important from the start. Touch is important from the start. Warmth is important from the start. These are the early guides. Before clear sight, before strong hearing, before steady walking, the kitten already knows how to move toward the most important things in its world. It can sense the mother through contact, scent, and heat. In that way, its first world is not empty. It is simply very small and very close. Most of early life is built around a simple rhythm. Sleep, nurse, warm up, sleep again. A newborn kitten may spend almost the entire day asleep, waking only in short intervals. This heavy sleep is not laziness. It is one of the conditions of growth. So much development is happening so quickly that rest becomes one of the main features of life itself. The body is growing, the nervous system is developing, and all of it is happening while the kitten still looks, to our eyes, almost paused between arrival and becoming. That may be the strangest and most beautiful thing about the newborn stage. A kitten is alive, but still so incomplete. It is present, but not yet fully open to the world. It is a beginning in the most literal sense. Nearly every major system is still on its way. Sight is still waiting. Hearing is still waiting. Balance is still waiting. Coordination is still waiting. Even the daily rhythm of being awake and active has not really begun yet. So when we picture a newborn kitten, it helps to picture something more delicate than most people realize. Not a playful little cat yet, but a tiny life at the edge of its own beginning, held together by warmth, milk, sleep, and closeness. And from that quiet state, little by little, the first routine of kitten life begins to take shape. In the earliest days of kitten life, almost everything runs on repetition. The pattern is simple, but it is also very precise. A newborn kitten wakes, searches for milk, nurses, settles into warmth, and falls back asleep. Then, after a short while, the pattern begins again. To an outside observer, this routine can seem uneventful, but in reality, it is one of the most important systems in early life. That quiet loop is what keeps the kitten growing, protected, and stable during a stage when it still cannot do very much on its own. Nursing is one of the first major actions in a kitten's life. Ideally, a kitten begins nursing very early, often within the first couple of hours after birth. At that stage, the body is tiny, energy reserves are limited, and early feeding matters a great deal. The first milk, called colostrum, is especially important. It is not just food. It also carries immune support from the mother during a short early window, helping the kitten receive protection while its own immune system is still very immature. In a way, this means the kitten's first meals are doing more than filling the stomach. They are also helping support the body's first defenses. The act of nursing itself is quiet, but full of purpose. A newborn kitten uses smell, touch, and warmth to find the mother and reach a teat. Once there, it latches and feeds in a rhythm that may already look oddly practiced, even though the kitten is only just beginning life. This is one of those remarkable things about early development. So much is still unfinished, Yet some behaviors arrive ready enough to keep life moving forward. Feeding has to work early, because without it, nothing else can continue. This is also where one of the most familiar cat behaviors begins. Kittens often knead while nursing, pressing their paws in an alternating motion against the mother. This likely helps stimulate milk flow. Later in life, many cats keep kneading when they are content, sleepy, or relaxed, which means a behavior people often see as simply cute may actually begin as part of one of the earliest feeding routines in life. It is a small reminder that many adult cat behaviors have very deep roots in kittenhood. Around nursing, the rest of life stays just as repetitive. Newborn kittens sleep for most of the day, waking only for short periods. Between feedings, they settle into warmth, often pressed against the mother or against littermates. This close contact helps conserve heat and maintain stability. In those first days, warmth is not separate from safety. Warmth is part of safety. To be close is to be protected. To be still is to conserve energy. To sleep is to keep growing. The mother's role in this routine goes far beyond providing milk. Very young kittens cannot fully manage basic bodily functions, otherwise known as elimination, on their own, so the mother usually stimulates urination and defecation by licking them. This means one of the simplest body functions still depends on maternal care. Cleaning is part of care too. Grooming helps keep the kittens dry, clean, and attended to. The mother is, in many ways, the system that holds early kitten life together. She feeds, warms, cleans, stimulates, and guards. Without all of that, the newborn kitten's body is not yet ready to handle the basics alone. There is something almost mechanical about this early stage, but not in a cold way. It is a living rhythm built from timing and contact. The kitten does not yet have a schedule in the human sense, but its life is still ruled by cycles. Hunger returns, sleep returns, warmth must be maintained, care must be repeated. The same acts happen again and again, not because life is empty at this stage, but because repetition is exactly what early development needs. And that may be the most important thing to understand about these first days. Simplicity does not mean nothing is happening. In fact, an enormous amount is happening. The kitten is growing, the brain is developing, the body is stabilizing. Early immunity is being supported. Tiny movements are being practiced. The whole animal is being carried forward by a routine that looks quiet from the outside, but is full of biological work underneath. So the first routine of kitten life is not just a series of repeated actions. It is a survival pattern. Nurse, sleep, warm up, be cleaned, begin again. And within that soft repetition, the first real changes are already beginning. Little by little, the body will start to wake more fully. The senses will open. Movement will become less uncertain. And what now feels like a tiny closed circle of milk, heat, and sleep will slowly begin to widen into something more. After those first quiet days, kittenhood begins to change in a way that feels almost like watching a tiny world slowly switch itself on. The changes do not all happen at once. They arrive in stages. One small ability appears, then another, then another. And because the first weeks move so quickly, the growth of a kitten can almost be told like a timeline of awakening. In the first week, a kitten is still living very much in that newborn state. Sleep takes up nearly the whole day. Movement is weak and close to the ground. The senses are still limited. Life is mostly about staying warm, finding milk, and remaining close to the mother and littermates. But even in this earlier stage, growth is already moving fast beneath the surface. A kitten's body is not resting in one form. It is changing hour by hour, even when most of that change is still hidden. Near the end of the first week and into the second, one of the most noticeable changes begins. The eyes start to open. They do not usually open all at once in a sudden, dramatic way. Instead, it is often gradual, with narrow slits appearing first before the eyes open more fully over the following days. By around 10 to 14 days, many kittens have their eyes open. But open eyes do not mean fully developed sight. Vision at this stage is still limited. The world is beginning to appear, but not yet in the sharp and steady way an older kitten or adult cat experiences it. Around this same general period, the ears also begin changing. Hearing is not fully ready at birth, but as the early weeks pass, sound becomes more available to the kitten. This matters because the world is now expanding beyond touch, scent, and warmth. Little by little, the kitten is becoming more aware that there is a wider environment around it. The body that was once almost closed to the outside world is beginning to open. Then, in the range of roughly 2 to 4 weeks, movement starts becoming more purposeful. At first, a kitten's motions are awkward and uncertain. The body is still weak. Balance is still developing, and the legs do not seem entirely reliable. But this is also when the first real wobbly exploration begins. The kitten may start lifting itself more, shifting around more deliberately, and making short little trips away from where it began. These are not graceful movements yet. In fact, they often look clumsy and unstable. But they are important because they mark the beginning of mobility as something more than just wriggling for warmth or milk. By around 3 weeks, many kittens begin early walking. This is still not the elegant movement people associate with cats. It is shaky, uneven, and full of tiny corrections. The kitten may wobble, tilt, or pause often. But from this point on, movement tends to improve quickly. Practice builds strength. Strength supports balance. Balance supports curiosity. And curiosity pushes the kitten to keep trying. This is one of the lovely patterns of early development. The more the kitten can do, the more it wants to do, and that wanting becomes part of growth itself. Around this same broad window, baby teeth begin to erupt. That may seem like a small detail, but it marks another major step in development. Teeth are part of the shift toward later eating, chewing, and weaning. By around 6 to 8 weeks, many kittens have a full set of baby teeth. So even while the outside story seems to be about opening eyes and taking first steps, another quieter story is happening inside the mouth and digestive system, preparing the kitten for a different stage of life. What makes this period so fascinating is how layered it is. A kitten is not just learning to walk. It is learning to see more, hear more, move more, and interact more. The body is not changing in one single direction. It is unfolding in many directions at once. And that is why the early weeks can feel so dramatic, even when the individual changes are small. a slightly steadier step, a longer look, a more curious turn of the head, a tiny tooth beginning to come through. Each one is a sign that the closed world of newborn life is widening. So this phase of kittenhood can almost be imagined as one body slowly waking up, step by step. The kitten is still very young, still very dependent, and still far from adulthood. But it is no longer only a newborn. It is becoming something more active, more aware, and more visibly itself. And that is what makes the next comparison so important. Because even now, when a kitten begins to look more like a little cat, its body and needs are still very different from those of an adult. As a kitten grows through those early weeks, it starts to look more and more like a little cat. The eyes are open. The body is moving more. The face is easier to recognize as feline. And because of that, it becomes very easy to think of a kitten as simply a smaller version of an adult cat. But that is not really what a kitten is. A kitten is living in a very different biological state, with different needs, different limits, and a different relationship to the world. One of the clearest differences is energy. Kittens are growing quickly, which means their bodies need a great deal of fuel relative to their size. An adult cat needs energy to maintain itself. A kitten needs energy to maintain itself and to build itself at the same time. Bones are growing. Muscles are developing. Organs are maturing. The brain is still changing rapidly. So even though a kitten is small, its body is doing an enormous amount of work. That is why kittens need richer, more frequent nutrition than adult cats. Their small size does not mean small demands. In many ways, it means the opposite. Sleep is another major difference. Adult cats sleep a lot compared to humans, but kittens sleep even more, especially in the earliest months. That extra sleep is tied to development. Growth is intense in kittenhood, and sleep supports that process. A kitten may seem lazy if you only look at how many hours it spends resting. But underneath that stillness, the body is busy. The nervous system is developing. Tissues are growing. Rhythms are being established. In a kitten, sleep is not just downtime. It is part of the construction process. Kittens are also much less tolerant of missed meals, dehydration, and cold. An adult cat has a more stable system and a greater margin for error. A kitten has a smaller body, fewer reserves, and several systems that are still maturing. If an adult cat skips part of a meal or spends a short time in mild discomfort, it may recover with little trouble. A very young kitten is more fragile. The same disruption matters more. This is part of what makes kittenhood such a careful stage of life. The body is not only smaller, it is more vulnerable. Social development is different too. An adult cat already has habits, preferences, and learned responses. A kitten is still forming those things. Early experiences matter in a special way during kittenhood, because this is when the brain is still learning what feels normal, safe, and worth paying attention to. Sounds, textures, handling, other animals, and everyday rhythms can all leave strong impressions during this time. That does not mean an adult cat cannot learn, because adult cats can. But in a kitten, the world is being organized for the first time. First impressions carry more weight. Even the body shape tells part of the story. Kittens often seem to have larger-looking eyes, rounder faces, smaller muzzles, and softer proportions than adult cats. Their movements can also seem unfinished. An adult cat usually moves with a kind of quiet precision. Even when it is playful, the movement often looks controlled. A kitten, by contrast, may wobble, overreach, slide, bounce too far, or misjudge a landing. That awkwardness is not a flaw. It is evidence of a body still learning its own size, strength, and timing. There is also a difference in how kittens and adult cats meet the world emotionally. Many adult cats are more settled into themselves. They know their routines. They know their spaces. Kittens are often more visibly curious, reactive, and exploratory because nearly everything is still new. A moving shadow, a rustling sound, a new smell, or an unfamiliar object can become a major event. The kitten is not just passing through the world. It is mapping the world as it goes. So when we compare a kitten to an adult cat, the most important thing to remember is that kittenhood is not just a smaller scale. It is a separate phase, built around growth, sensitivity, learning, and change. The kitten may already carry the outline of the adult cat to come, but it is still living in a different kind of body, one that needs more rest, more fuel, more protection, and more time. And once we understand that, it becomes easier to notice the next part of the story. Because if a kitten is living in a body that is still under construction, then the body itself becomes something worth looking at more closely. How do those weak early limbs become steady? How does awkwardness become balance? And how does a soft little shape slowly grow into the grace cats are known for? At first, a kitten's body does not move like a cat's body at all. When people think of cats, they usually think of balance, quiet precision, and easy control. They think of soft landings, careful steps, and the smooth confidence of an animal that seems to know exactly where every paw should go. But a kitten begins far from that. A kitten's body is still learning how to hold itself up, how to shift weight, and how to turn effort into control. In the earliest weeks, the growing body is less like a finished machine and more like a system being assembled as it moves. Part of that is simple growth. Across the first weeks and months, a kitten is building bone, muscle, coordination, and strength all at once. The skeleton is developing quickly. Muscles are gaining force. Joints are being used in new ways. The body is getting longer, stronger, and more capable almost week by week. But growth does not create grace all at once. First, it creates possibility. The kitten gains enough strength to try something, then enough balance to do it a little better, then enough control to repeat it with more success. That is why early movement often looks so wobbly. A kitten may stand, but sway slightly. It may walk, but with little pauses and corrections. It may try to turn quickly and then overdo the motion, almost folding into itself. These awkward movements are not mistakes in the sense of something gone wrong. They are part of the body learning its own shape. Limb control is still developing. Balance is still developing. Strength is still developing. The kitten is not failing to move like a cat. It is learning what moving like a cat even means. This is also why kittens can seem oddly out of proportion. Their paws may look a little too large for the rest of the body. The tail may seem long and expressive before the body fully knows how to use it. The head may still feel round and heavy compared with the thinness of the legs. All of this can make a kitten seem slightly unfinished in a visible way. It is a body where parts are growing together, but not always at the same pace. That unevenness is part of the charm of kittenhood, but it is also part of the biology of it. The body is still catching up with itself. The tail becomes especially interesting during this period. In adult cats, the tail helps with balance, turning, and body control. In kittens, that role is already beginning to take shape. As climbing, jumping, and more active movement appear, the tail becomes part of the body's balancing system. A kitten may not use it with the same elegance as an adult cat, but the tail is already helping the body organize itself in motion. It is one more sign that the famous feline sense of balance does not appear from nowhere. It is built slowly through repetition. And repetition matters here more than anything. Every clumsy little climb, every uneven jump, every overexcited chase across the floor is giving the body information. How far can I reach? How hard can I push? How quickly can I stop? What happens if I twist too fast? What happens if I land a little crooked? These are not questions a kitten asks in words, of course, but they are questions the body is constantly testing. Movement becomes a kind of experiment, and each attempt teaches something. That is why so much kitten behavior can look playful and messy, while actually being deeply useful. A kitten that tumbles, bounces, skids, and pounces is not just being silly. It is rehearsing the basic elements of later feline skill. Coordination is being built. Timing is being built. Strength is being built. Even confidence is being built. The adult cat's graceful precision begins here, hidden inside motions that still look unstable and improvised. So the growing kitten body is not just becoming larger, it is becoming organized. Force is becoming control. Wobbling is becoming balance. Scattered effort is becoming cleaner movement. And as the body becomes steadier, the world itself also begins to feel richer, because movement is only part of the story. At the same time, the senses are slowly turning on, allowing the kitten to experience more and more of the world it is learning to move through. At the beginning of life, a kitten's world is small, dim, and close. It is shaped less by sight and sound than by touch, warmth, and scent. In those first days, the world is not yet a detailed place full of separate objects and distances. It is more like a soft field of immediate needs. Where is the mother? Where is the milk? Where is the warmth? But as the early weeks pass, that simple world begins to open. Little by little, the outside world becomes fuller, sharper, and more detailed. Vision is one of the clearest examples of this change. A kitten is born with its eyes closed, and even after the eyes begin to open, sight is still not fully developed. The opening itself often happens gradually, usually around the end of the first week and into the second. At first, this does not mean the kitten suddenly sees the world clearly. The eyes may be open, but the visual system is still maturing. Early sight is limited and incomplete. Shapes and light begin to matter more, but the crisp, confident vision of an older cat is still a long way off. Clearer, more adult-like sight develops later, often closer to 6 to 8 weeks and beyond. This helps explain another familiar feature of young kittens. Their eyes often appear blue at first. Many people know this, but fewer know why. In very young kittens, the pigment in the iris is not yet fully active, so the eyes can have that soft blue look early on. Over time, as pigment develops more fully, the eye color may change. So even something as simple and beautiful as a kitten's gaze is part of a larger developmental story. What looks finished at first glance may actually be temporary. Hearing follows a similar pattern of gradual arrival. At birth, the ears are folded, and hearing is very limited. But across the early weeks, the ears begin to open the world in a new way. Sounds become more meaningful. Voices, movement, little disturbances in the environment, and the presence of other kittens all become easier to notice. By the end of the first month, hearing is much more developed, and the world likely feels far more layered than it did at the start. A kitten that once lived in a mostly quiet and close contact world is now beginning to live in a world with direction, pattern, and sound. Smell, though, matters from the very beginning. Before sight becomes useful and before hearing becomes clear, scent is already helping guide life. Smell helps the kitten find the mother, find milk, and stay oriented in that small early world. It is one of the first ways the outside world becomes meaningful. In some ways, smell is the earliest map. It tells the kitten where safety is, where nourishment is, and where closeness can be found. Touch is just as important. The body learns through contact long before it understands distance. A warm surface, the pressure of other kittens nearby, the feel of the mother's fur, and the shape of the world against the skin all help create a very early sense of being held inside life. And then there are the whiskers, which are more than decoration. Whiskers act as sensitive touch tools. They help detect contact and even subtle changes in airflow near objects. For a small animal still learning where its body ends and where the world begins, whiskers are part of that quiet guidance system. So the kitten's senses do not arrive as a complete package. They arrive in layers. First, one part of the world becomes clearer, then another. Light begins to matter more. Sound begins to matter more. Space begins to feel more real. The world that once existed almost entirely in terms of warmth, touch, and milk slowly becomes a world of movement, shapes, distances, sounds, and possibilities. And that makes early development feel especially beautiful. A kitten is not simply growing bigger. It is gaining access to reality in stages. The world is becoming more available to it, more visible, more audible, more detailed. Each day, there is a little more to notice than there was before. But as the world grows richer, the body still needs enormous amounts of rest to support all of this change. Because while the senses are turning on, the nervous system is still building itself too. And that is part of why kittens sleep so much. Not because life is empty, but because so much is happening beneath the surface. A kitten's sleep can look almost unbelievable at first. Very young kittens can sleep close to 22 hours a day, which means much of early life passes in a state of rest. They wake in small windows, nurse, shift position, press into warmth, and then seem to disappear back into sleep again. To a human observer, this can make kittenhood look quiet or even uneventful. But that quietness is not emptiness. Sleep in early life is one of the main conditions that makes rapid growth possible. As kittens get older, they still sleep a great deal, but the total amount slowly begins to drop. Instead of spending nearly the whole day asleep, older kittens often move closer to around 18 hours of sleep, though it varies. Even that is still a very large amount of rest. Adult cats also sleep much more than humans do, but kittens take that pattern to an even more extreme level because they are not just maintaining the body they already have. They are actively building one. Their bones are growing, muscles are strengthening, the brain is developing, and the senses are becoming more organized. Sleep supports all of that. It helps to think of kitten sleep as active construction time. The body may look still on the outside, but inside, development continues. Tissues are being repaired and built. Growth processes are being supported. The nervous system is still wiring itself into a more stable and responsive form. In a kitten, sleep is not separate from development. It is one of the main ways development is allowed to happen. That is why early life can be so sleep-heavy without being wasteful. The body is using that rest. This is also where sleep becomes especially interesting from a scientific point of view. Research in kittens has shown that when REM sleep is disrupted during key periods of development, aspects of visual development can be affected. That is a remarkable thing to realize. It means sleep is not simply helping a kitten feel restored afterward. It is part of how the kitten's sensory world is being shaped in the first place. A sleeping kitten is not merely pausing life for a while. In certain ways, it is still becoming itself through that sleep. That makes the sight of a sleeping kitten feel a little different. The twitching paws, the tiny movements of whiskers, the soft shifts in position, the sudden little stir before settling again. All of that belongs to a nervous system still growing into its own patterns. Sleep in kittenhood is not a blank state. It is full of quiet activity. Even when the eyes are closed and the body looks completely relaxed, major work is still going on beneath the surface. This also helps explain one of the most familiar things about kittens: their strange pattern of deep rest followed by sudden bursts of energy. A kitten may appear completely still for a long stretch of time, then wake up and explode into movement, racing, climbing, batting, pouncing, and tumbling with almost startling intensity. Then, not long after, it may collapse back into sleep again. To us, this can look funny or exaggerated, but it makes sense when rest and development are so closely linked. The body gathers energy, uses it intensely, learns through motion, and then returns to sleep to recover and continue growing. In that way, sleep and play are not opposites in kittenhood. They belong to the same cycle. Sleep restores and supports growth. Wakefulness allows practice and experience. Then sleep returns to support the next round of development. Early life is built on that rhythm. Deep rest, brief activity, deep rest again. And because kittens are so small and so unfinished at first, that rhythm is even more important. A young kitten has very little extra energy to waste. Rest protects the body. It conserves warmth. It supports growth. It allows the developing brain and body to keep pace with everything that is changing so quickly. The outside world may be opening little by little, but the kitten still needs long periods of retreat from it. So kitten sleep is not just a charming feature of early life. It is one of its main engines. The near-constant sleeping of a newborn, the long, heavy naps of an older kitten, the dreamy twitches, the sudden wakeful bursts, all of it belongs to a life stage where growth is moving very fast. And from sleep, it feels natural to turn to the other major engine of kittenhood, because if rest helps build the body quietly, then food is what fuels that building from the inside. If sleep is one of the great engines of kittenhood, then nutrition is the other. A kitten's body is growing so quickly that it cannot simply be fed in the same way as an adult cat. Early life requires food that is not only regular, but also dense, rich, and closely matched to the demands of development. A kitten is not eating just to stay alive from one day to the next. It is eating to build bone, support muscle, grow organs, strengthen the nervous system, and fuel a body that is changing almost constantly. At the very beginning, that fuel comes from milk, and the first milk matters in a special way. Colostrum, which is produced early after birth, helps provide immune support during a short window in the kitten's first hours of life. This is one of the reasons early nursing is so important. The kitten is not only taking in nourishment, it is also receiving help at a time when its own immune defenses are still very immature. In that sense, milk at the start of life is doing more than one job at once. It feeds, and it also helps protect. As the days continue, milk remains the center of early nutrition. A newborn kitten has a very small body and only limited reserves, which means there is not much room for delay or error. It needs food often. The body is using energy quickly, both because kittens are small and because they are growing at such a rapid pace. An adult cat can often tolerate longer gaps and more variation. A young kitten is less flexible. Food has to arrive on time because growth is moving too fast for the body to simply wait. This is one of the easiest ways to misunderstand kitten life. Because kittens are small, people may assume their food needs are modest, but relative to body size, a kitten can have very high energy demands. Around 10 weeks of age, for example, those demands can be especially intense. The body is still being built, and so each meal is not just maintenance, it is raw material. Nutrition in kittenhood is less like topping up a tank and more like delivering supplies to an active construction site. That is also why kitten diets are different from adult cat diets. Cats are obligate carnivores, which means they are biologically built around nutrients that come from animal-based foods. But kitten nutrition goes one step further than simply being carnivorous. It has to be matched to growth. That means dense energy, high-quality protein, enough fat, and the right balance of nutrients to support rapid development. A growing body cannot simply eat a smaller version of an adult meal and be expected to thrive in the same way. Kittenhood calls for food designed for building, not just sustaining. Hydration is part of this picture too. Because kittens are small and more fragile, keeping the body properly nourished also means keeping it properly supported overall. Food, fluids, warmth, and timing all work together. A kitten that is too cold may not digest properly. A kitten that misses feeding can weaken quickly. Early nutrition is not a casual background process. It is one of the central pillars holding the whole stage of life upright. And yet, there is something very quiet about the way this happens. A kitten nurses, sleeps, nurses again, and all the while the body is changing. The legs grow stronger, the head lifts more steadily, the senses begin to open, the coat thickens, the tiny frame begins, little by little, to take on more substance. It is easy to see the movement and think that movement is the main story. But underneath every step, every stretch, and every new ability is the steady, hidden work of nutrition. So when we think about how a kitten is built, we should think not just about what it does, but about what fuels what it does. Milk in the beginning is not simply comfort. It is chemistry, timing, immunity, and growth all at once. And later, as the kitten moves toward more independent feeding, that same truth continues. Nutrition is never just food in a general sense. In kittenhood, it is food precisely matched to the needs of a rapidly developing body. But even that first deep dependence on milk does not last forever. As the weeks pass, the kitten begins to change again. Teeth appear. Interest in the wider world grows. Feeding behavior starts to shift. And slowly, almost quietly, one of the first great transitions of kitten life begins. The movement from milk toward food. The shift from milk to food is one of the quietest major changes in kittenhood. It does not usually happen in one sudden moment. A kitten does not wake up one day as a milk-drinking newborn and go to sleep that night as an independent eater. Instead, weaning happens gradually. It unfolds across time, with the body, the mouth, the digestive system, and behavior all changing together. That slow pace matters because this is not just a change in diet. It is one of the first clear steps away from complete dependence. At the start of life, milk is everything. It provides energy, immune support, hydration, and comfort. But as the weeks pass, the kitten begins changing in ways that make other food possible. Mobility improves. The kitten can move farther, investigate more, and stay awake for longer stretches. The mouth is changing too. Baby teeth begin to come in, and that simple fact opens the door to a different kind of eating. A body that once only knew how to latch and suckle is beginning to develop the tools for chewing. This is why weaning is both physical and behavioral. Physically, the kitten is becoming more capable of handling something other than milk. Behaviorally, the kitten is becoming more interested in the world, and that growing curiosity eventually includes food. At first, that interest may be small. A kitten may sniff at what the mother is eating, or show mild interest in a soft food offered nearby. It may not really understand what to do with it right away. That is part of the process. The shift is not only about being able to eat, it is also about learning what food is. The early foods offered during weaning are usually soft and easy to manage. That makes sense, because even with baby teeth coming in, the mouth and digestive system are still adjusting. The kitten is moving from one nutritional world into another. Milk has been familiar, automatic, and built into the earliest rhythm of life. Solid or semi-solid food is something different. It must be explored, tasted, and gradually accepted. So the early stage of weaning often looks a little uncertain. There may be sniffing, licking, pawing, and small messy attempts before eating becomes more purposeful. At the same time, nursing usually does not stop all at once. That is another reason weaning feels so gentle. For a while, the kitten may still nurse while also beginning to explore other food. In that overlap, kittenhood shows its gradual nature once again. The old system is not instantly removed before the new one is ready. Instead, the kitten lives in between for a while, still connected to milk, but slowly moving toward a broader form of nourishment. This transition also changes the daily rhythm of life. In the earliest stage, feeding is almost entirely tied to the mother. During weaning, that connection begins loosening. Food starts to become something the kitten can approach more directly. That matters because it is one of the first times the kitten's own growing abilities begin taking over a basic life function. It is a small form of independence, but a meaningful one. The kitten is no longer only receiving. It is beginning to participate more actively in how it is fed. There is something very interesting about how quiet this shift can be. Walking looks dramatic. Eye-opening looks dramatic. Even play can look dramatic. But weaning often happens with much less visual excitement, even though it is one of the major turning points in early development. It changes the body's relationship to food, to the mother, and to daily routine. The kitten is becoming more separate, even if only a little. More able, more self-directed, more prepared for the next stage of life. And yet, even here, the process stays gentle. The kitten is still young. It is still growing very quickly. It still needs carefully matched nutrition and a lot of support. Weaning does not make it adult. It simply moves it one step farther along the path. The body is still under construction, and the mind is still learning at high speed. That is part of why this section of kittenhood leads so naturally into the next one. Because once food is no longer the only exciting thing in life, movement itself begins to take on a new role. Curiosity grows. Energy is expressed in new ways. And all those little pounces, chases, swats and tumbles begin to reveal themselves not as random bursts of fun, but as a serious kind of learning disguised as play. Play is one of the most familiar parts of kittenhood, and also one of the easiest to underestimate. When people watch kittens play, it often looks light, silly, and almost chaotic. A paw shoots out at a moving tail. A tiny body suddenly springs sideways for no obvious reason. Two littermates tumble into each other, roll apart, and then rush back together again. A small object skids across the floor and becomes, for a few breathless seconds, the most important thing in the world. It all looks spontaneous, and in a way it is. But underneath that light and messy surface, play is doing serious work. A kitten does not play just because it has extra energy to burn. Play is part of development. It helps the growing body and growing brain learn how to work together. Every pounce, every chase, every awkward little jump is giving the kitten information. How far away is that object? How quickly can I get to it? What happens if I launch too early? What happens if I turn too fast? These are not questions the kitten thinks through in words, but they are questions the body is constantly testing through motion. That is why kitten play often includes the same kinds of actions again and again. Batting, chasing, pouncing, wrestling, ambushing. These movements may look random when seen one at a time, but together they form a pattern. The kitten is practicing timing, force, distance, and coordination. A moving toy, a sibling's tail, a rustling scrap of paper, or even a shifting patch of light can become a kind of lesson. The body tries something, gets feedback, and adjusts. Then it tries again. Object play is especially useful in this way. When a kitten bats at something small and moving, it is working on precision. It is learning how to track motion, how to reach with control, and how to judge the space between its body and the thing it wants to touch. Even missing the object is useful. In fact, missing may be one of the most useful parts because it teaches correction. The kitten learns not only from success, but from misjudging and trying again. That is part of why play can look so messy. It is full of experiments. Social play adds another layer. When kittens wrestle with littermates, they are not just building strength and agility. They are also learning adjustment. One kitten bites too hard, the other responds. One pushes too far, the other twists away. Through these exchanges, the kittens begin to learn restraint, response, and flexibility. Social play teaches them that movement is not only about objects in the environment. It is also about other bodies, with their own timing, reactions, and limits. This makes play one of the great bridges of kittenhood. It connects the growing body to later adult skills. A kitten that chases, pounces, and swats may look like it is simply enjoying itself, and it probably is. But it is also building the early foundations of balance, aim, speed, and control. The movements are playful now, but they are not separate from the body the kitten will one day grow into. The adult cat's grace begins here, hidden inside all this tumbling and sudden motion. There is also something important about how emotionally safe play can be. A kitten explores action through play before the stakes are high. It practices pursuit without needing real prey. It practices quick movement without facing real danger. It practices social response without needing full adult control. In that sense, play is a gentle training ground. It allows the kitten to rehearse life in a softer form. And that is why play is not wasted time. It is one of the main ways a kitten becomes more capable. What looks like fun is also rehearsal. What looks like disorder is often learning in motion. What looks like a tiny drama on the floor is really the body and brain teaching each other how to work together. So when we watch kittens bat, chase, roll, and leap, we are not only watching entertainment. We are watching development disguised as delight. And from there, it is only a small step to notice something deeper. Because many of those same playful motions are not new inventions of kittenhood at all. They are the early shadow of something older, something more ancient in the cat body itself. Under the game, another pattern is beginning to show. The first signs of hunting behavior. There is something quietly ancient inside even the softest little kitten. A kitten may look delicate, sleepy, and harmless, but hidden inside that small body is the basic pattern of a hunter. Not a finished hunter yet, of course. Not a skilled one. But the shape of the behavior is already there. It appears early, in miniature form, through movements that many people first notice as play. One of the clearest signs of this is how strongly kittens respond to motion. A still object may be ignored for a while, but the moment something flickers, darts, rolls, or twitches, the kitten's attention can change instantly. The head lowers, the eyes fix, the body pauses. Then comes the crouch, the little wiggle, the sudden leap. This pattern feels familiar because it is familiar. It is the early form of stalking and pouncing, one of the oldest behavioral patterns in the cat family. That is why so much kitten play looks like a tiny hunting scene. Chasing, crouching, batting, springing, ambushing from behind furniture, waiting for the perfect moment to launch. All of these actions mirror the larger sequence a cat uses when pursuing prey. Even when the target is only a toy, a leaf, a sibling's tail, or a scrap of paper sliding across the floor, the body often follows the same rough pattern. First attention, then focus, then approach or stillness, then the sudden release of motion. What makes this especially interesting is that kittens do these things even when they are well fed. Hunger is not the only force behind the behavior. A full kitten may still stalk, pounce, and chase with complete seriousness. That tells us something important. Hunting behavior in cats is not simply a reaction to empty stomachs. It is built much deeper into the body than that. The pattern belongs to the animal itself. Food may give it purpose in adulthood, but the structure of the behavior exists before real hunting is ever needed. Instinct gives the basic outline. It tells the kitten what kinds of actions to be drawn toward. But instinct alone does not create skill. That is where practice comes in. A kitten may know to crouch, but not yet know how far to spring. It may know to swipe, but not yet know how to time the strike. It may rush too early, land too hard, or miss completely. That is not failure. That is exactly how control is learned. Experience sharpens what instinct begins. So when a kitten pounces on a moving string, or hides behind a chair leg waiting for a sibling to pass by, something more than random excitement is taking place. The body is rehearsing. Muscles are learning when to tense and release. Eyes are learning to track motion. The brain is learning how timing, speed, and space fit together. A hunter is not appearing all at once. It is being assembled, one playful mistake at a time. And this gives kittenhood a wider feeling. It reminds us that the soft little body in front of us is still a feline body. Under the fluff, under the clumsy jumps and the oversized paws, there is an ancient design. The domestic kitten may grow up in a quiet home, sleep on a blanket, and chase toys instead of prey, but it still carries the old cat pattern inside it. The family resemblance is not only in the ears, whiskers, and tail. It is also in the movements, in the stillness before a leap, and in the deep attraction to motion. That instinct, though, does not grow by itself. It develops inside a world of warmth, contact, and early relationships. A kitten does not become more capable in isolation. It grows inside a family group, shaped by the mother, surrounded by littermates, and carried forward by shared closeness as much as by instinct. A kitten's early life is not shaped by instinct alone. It is also shaped by closeness. Before a kitten knows much about the wider world, it knows the feeling of being near other bodies. The mother is there. The littermates are there. Warmth is shared. Milk is shared. Space is shared. Even rest is shared. In those first weeks, life is not only about growing as an individual. It is also about growing inside a small social world. The mother is the center of that world at first. She provides milk, warmth, grooming, and protection. She does not simply feed the kittens and leave them to develop on their own. Her body becomes the place where much of early life happens. The kittens sleep against her, nurse from her, and depend on her presence for regulation and stability. In the earlier stage, she also helps with basic bodily functions by licking them, because the kittens are not ready to manage that fully on their own. So her role is not just comforting, it is practical, constant, and deeply biological. Warmth is one of the clearest examples of this. Very young kittens are poor at regulating their own body temperature, which means contact matters right away. Pressing against the mother helps conserve heat, but littermates matter too. Kittens often sleep in small piles, bodies touching bodies, sharing warmth without needing to think about it. To us, that scene can look sweet and peaceful, and it is, but it is also functional. The closeness helps keep the kittens stable. In early life, affection and survival are often built into the same actions. Grooming is another part of this shared world. When the mother grooms her kittens, she is doing more than cleaning fur. Grooming is care. It is maintenance. It is body contact. It is part of how the kitten learns what safety feels like. Over time, grooming also becomes something the kittens begin to do more themselves and with one another. But in the earliest stage, it begins through the mother. The kitten is being introduced to life not only through food and warmth, but also through touch and repeated attention. Littermates matter in their own way too. At first, they are mostly companions in closeness. They sleep side by side, shift against one another, and make early life less solitary and less exposed. But as the kittens grow and become more mobile, the role of littermates expands. They become play partners, obstacles, teachers, and moving parts of the environment. A kitten watching its siblings is already learning something. A kitten tumbling with a sibling is learning even more. This is especially clear in rough and tumble play. Wrestling with littermates helps teach bite control, timing, and response. One kitten pushes, the other responds. One kitten bites too hard, and the exchange changes. Through this back and forth, kittens begin to learn that movement affects others, and that actions have consequences in a social setting. These are simple lessons, but important ones. The kitten is not just learning how its own body works. It is learning how its body works around other bodies. Observation plays a role too. Kittens are not learning only through direct action. They are also learning by being surrounded by behavior. They watch where others move, how others react, and what others seem to find important. The social world gives them patterns to notice. It gives them examples to follow. Life with the mother and littermates is not a silent background to development. It is part of development. This helps explain why early isolation can be so disruptive. When kittens are separated too early from the mother or from littermates, they lose more than simple company. They lose part of the setting in which normal early learning tends to happen. Social timing, restraint, confidence, and comfort are all shaped in those shared early weeks. That does not mean every kitten has the exact same path, but it does mean that closeness is not optional fluff around development. It is one of the structures that development grows inside. So when we picture kittenhood, it helps not to picture a single kitten by itself too often. The truer image, especially at the beginning, is a small cluster of life. Tiny bodies curled together, a mother cleaning, feeding, and settling them. Short bursts of play, shared sleep, shared warmth, shared learning. The kitten becomes itself inside that little group. And once that social world is in place, curiosity begins to reach farther outward. The kitten is no longer only responding to the family around it. It is beginning to notice the world beyond the pile of bodies, beyond the mother's fur, beyond the familiar nest of early life. Once a kitten has a little more strength, a little more balance, and a little more confidence, the world begins to invite a different kind of behavior. Not just feeding, not just sleeping, not just staying close. Now the kitten starts to explore. It begins to move toward things instead of only reacting to them. A new sound, a new texture, a shifting shadow, a doorway, a rustling object on the floor. All of these can become reasons to move, pause, stare, and investigate. This is where curiosity becomes one of the main forces shaping kittenhood. Kittens learn in a very physical way at first. They learn by moving, touching, sniffing, climbing, pawing, and testing. The body and the brain work together through repetition. A kitten approaches something unfamiliar, hesitates, reaches out, pulls back, then tries again. That pattern may look simple, but it is one of the foundations of learning. The kitten is gathering information. What is this? Is it safe? Does it move? Does it make sound? Can I climb it? Can I fit under it? These are not thoughts in the human sense, but they are the kinds of problems a growing kitten keeps solving through action. This is why trial and error matters so much in early life. A kitten does not become capable by getting everything right the first time. In fact, much of kittenhood is built around not getting things right at first. A jump is misjudged. A surface turns out to be slippery. A toy moves faster than expected. A new object seems interesting, then slightly alarming, then interesting again. These small mistakes are not interruptions to development. They are development. Through repetition, the kitten begins to build memory, confidence, and better control. There is also a special reason early experience matters so much in kittenhood. In the early weeks, kittens pass through what is often called a sensitive socialization window. During this period, the brain is especially open to forming lasting impressions about what is normal, safe, and familiar. That means the world a kitten meets early on can have a strong effect later. Calm handling, gentle voices, ordinary household sounds, safe objects, and steady routines can all help shape a kitten's sense of comfort. The same basic truth applies to other experiences too. Early life is not just a time of rapid growth in the body. It is a time when the brain is organizing the world. That is why calm, varied, safe exposure is so often emphasized in kitten care. A kitten that gently encounters different surfaces, different sounds, different kinds of touch, and different mild forms of novelty may become more adaptable and confident later on. Not because every single experience changes everything, but because early life is a period when small patterns can settle deeply. A quiet room, a familiar routine, a gentle hand, or a new toy can all become part of the kitten's early map. of what life is like. Exploration is one of the main ways that map gets built. When a kitten walks into a new corner, sniffs at a blanket, paws at a cardboard edge, or freezes to study a tiny moving object, it is doing more than amusing itself. It is connecting sensation to meaning. This smell belongs here. This surface feels soft. That sound came from over there. This space is climbable. That one is not. Curiosity turns the world from background into information. Enrichment helps with this too. A richer environment gives the kitten more chances to practice both body and mind. A toy that moves unpredictably, a safe object to climb, a different texture under the paws, or a small space to enter and leave can all help the kitten build confidence and flexibility. The point is not overstimulation. In fact, too much at once can be overwhelming. The point is gentle variety, enough change to invite learning, but not so much that the world feels chaotic. And what makes this stage so lovely is that curiosity often looks very quiet before it looks bold. A kitten may sit and stare for a long time before taking a single step. It may watch first, then test. It may retreat, then return. That is learning too. Curiosity is not always rushing forward. Sometimes it is a pause full of attention. So kittenhood is not only a time of growth and instinct, it is also a time of assembling understanding. Through repetition, safe exposure, and small acts of exploration, the kitten begins to learn what kind of world it lives in. And as it learns, it is also constantly signaling to others through sound, posture, touch, and closeness, because curiosity is only part of the story. The kitten is also becoming more expressive. As kittens grow, they do not only become more curious, they also become more expressive. In the earliest days, communication is very simple and very physical. A newborn kitten does not yet have a wide range of ways to signal what it feels or needs. But even then, it is not silent. It uses closeness, small sounds, movement, and contact to remain connected to the mother and to its littermates. Over time, those signals become richer, easier to read, and more varied. One of the first forms of communication in kittenhood is sound. Very young kittens often make soft mewing or crying sounds, especially when they are cold, separated, hungry, or uncomfortable. These sounds are not random. They help call attention to a need. In that sense, early vocalizing is part of survival. A tiny kitten cannot go solve its own problem. It can only signal that something is wrong or that something important is missing. The sound reaches outward, and care usually follows. But sound is only one part of the picture. Body position matters too, even early on. A kitten pressed tightly into the mother or into littermates is already expressing something about comfort and safety. A kitten stretching forward, lifting its head, or turning toward warmth is also communicating through movement, even if it does not know that in any conscious way. At the beginning of life, communication is deeply tied to the body itself. Need, comfort, and contact are all closely connected. As kittens grow a little older, those forms of expression become easier for us to notice. Purring begins to join the soft sound world around comfort, warmth, and closeness. A kitten nestled into a blanket, resting against a sibling, or settling beside a trusted person may begin to purr, and that sound can feel like one of the gentlest signs of contentment in the animal world. It does not mean the kitten is thinking in human emotions exactly the way we do, but it does suggest a state of ease, security, or soothing contact. Kneading belongs in this same world of expression. Earlier in life, kneading likely begins as a nursing behavior, helping stimulate milk flow. But later, the motion often remains, even when milk is no longer involved. A kitten may need a blanket, a soft bed, or a person's clothing, while purring or settling down to rest. This makes kneading one of those beautiful examples where an early survival behavior becomes a later comfort behavior. What began in feeding continues in safety and calm. Rubbing and contact-seeking behaviors also become more visible with time. A kitten may lean into another body, settle against a familiar leg, or seek out a close sleeping spot. These actions are not dramatic, but they carry meaning. They help build and maintain bonds. To stay close is often to express trust. To return to someone or something familiar is to show recognition and comfort. As coordination improves, posture becomes more readable too. The tail, ears, back, and head begin to say more. A kitten can hold itself with curiosity, caution, excitement, or relaxation. And those differences become easier to see as the body gains control. A raised tail can suggest confidence or friendly interest. Ears angled in a certain way can suggest attention or uncertainty. A crouched body may signal play, caution, or intense focus, depending on the moment. These signals do not appear all at once, but over time the kitten becomes easier to read because movement itself becomes more controlled. This is part of what makes communication in kittenhood so interesting. It starts simple and close to the body, then gradually becomes richer as the body and brain mature. At first, a signal may be little more than a cry, a press, or a turn toward warmth. Later, it becomes a fuller language of sound, contact, posture, and repeated behaviors. The kitten is not only learning about the world, it is also learning how to exist within relationships, how to ask, how to respond, and how to express comfort or interest through small everyday actions. And all of this is happening while the kitten's appearance is slowly changing too. The signals become easier to read partly because the kitten itself is changing week by week. The eyes, fur, whiskers, and body proportions are all shifting, which means expression is taking shape inside a body that is still visibly becoming something new. One of the quiet pleasures of watching a kitten grow is noticing how much its appearance changes, even when the changes are small. A kitten can seem almost the same from one week to the next, and yet not quite. The face shifts a little, the body stretches a little, the fur sits differently. The eyes seem to look back in a new way. Kittenhood is full of these subtle visual changes, where the animal is slowly becoming more clearly itself, while also moving, bit by bit, toward the look of an adult cat. The eyes are one of the first things people notice. Very young kittens often appear to have blue eyes, and for a while that soft blue look can seem like a permanent part of kittenhood. But in many kittens, it is only an early stage. The final eye color often has not settled yet because pigment in the iris is still developing. As that pigment becomes more active, the eyes may begin to change, sometimes gradually, and sometimes in a way that becomes noticeable over just a few weeks. This means that even something as striking as eye color is part of the larger story of development. The kitten we see at one age is not visually complete yet. It is still on its way. The fur changes too, though often in quieter ways. Very young kittens can look especially soft, fluffy, or downy, with a coat that seems almost more like a layer of softness than a finished covering. As the body grows, the fur may begin to sit differently. In some kittens, the coat starts to look sleeker. In others, it remains fluffy, but changes in density or texture. The exact pattern depends on the cat, of course, but the general point remains the same. The fur of a growing kitten is not just sitting on a changing body. It is part of the visible change itself. Whiskers stand out in a special way during this stage. They are easy to notice because they often seem so dramatic on such a small face, extending outward with a kind of delicate confidence. But whiskers are not only visually striking, they are also functional. They help kittens sense contact and detect subtle changes in the space around them. In that way, the whiskers belong to both appearance and experience at once. They shape how the kitten looks, and they also help shape how the kitten moves through the world. Body proportions may be the biggest visual change of all. Young kittens often have a very round and infant-like look. The face is fuller. The eyes seem large for the head. The body can appear compact and soft, with short-looking legs and a shape that feels almost made for cuddling. But as the weeks pass, that look begins to stretch out. The body gets longer. The legs begin to seem more in proportion. The face slowly loses some of its roundness. The whole kitten starts to look a little less like a baby animal and a little more like a young cat. This is part of why kittens can feel so changeable, even when the changes are difficult to name. You may look at a kitten and simply feel that it seems older, more alert, more cat-like than it did before, even if you cannot point to a single dramatic difference. That feeling often comes from many small shifts happening at once. A slightly leaner frame, a steadier gaze, a coat that sits differently, a face that no longer looks quite as round as it did. Development often works this way. The body changes in many tiny ways, and together, those tiny changes create a new impression. There is something especially lovely about that slow visual transition. A kitten does not suddenly stop looking like a kitten. Instead, the look of kittenhood gradually loosens. The soft baby shape remains for a while, then begins to mix with hints of the adult form to come. For a time, the kitten carries both at once. It still has the charm of early life, but also the first lines of maturity beginning to show through. And these outward changes are not happening by themselves. They are tied to quieter daily developments too. As the body looks more capable, it is also becoming more capable in ordinary routines. Teeth are coming in. Grooming becomes more deliberate. Habits grow tidier. The kitten is changing not only in how it appears, but in how it manages itself from day to day. Some of the most important changes in kittenhood do not look dramatic at all. They happen in the background of daily life, in quiet routines that make the kitten seem a little more capable, a little more deliberate, and a little more self-directed. Teeth come in. grooming becomes more purposeful. Basic bodily functions become easier to manage. Litter habits begin to form. None of these changes are as visually striking as opening eyes or learning to pounce, but they matter just as much. They are part of the slow shift from total dependence toward a more organized everyday life. Teeth are one of the clearest examples. In the early part of kittenhood, baby teeth begin to erupt, and that small detail changes a great deal. Teeth help support the shift from milk toward soft food, and eventually more solid eating. They also change how a kitten interacts with the world. A mouth that once mainly nursed now begins to chew, test, and explore in a new way. This is why young kittens may seem especially interested in nibbling or mouthing things. Teething is not just a detail of the mouth. It is part of how the kitten's body prepares for a wider range of behaviors. Chewing then becomes one of those ordinary actions that quietly signals growth. A kitten that chews is not only eating differently, it is using the mouth differently, testing pressure differently, and engaging the world in a more active way. The mouth is becoming part of the kitten's toolset, not just its feeding system. That may be one reason this stage can look a little busier. The kitten is not simply receiving care anymore. It is beginning to do more things with its own body. Grooming follows a similar path. At first, grooming begins with the mother. She cleans the kittens, tends to their fur, and keeps their early environment more stable. In that stage, grooming is something done for the kitten. But over time, grooming slowly becomes a kitten skill too. The kitten starts licking its own fur, making short attempts at self-cleaning, and gradually becoming more deliberate about it. This is a lovely shift because it shows the kitten beginning to manage its own body in ways that once depended completely on care from outside. Grooming is also more than just cleaning. It helps with body awareness. A kitten licking its paw or washing its face is not only removing dirt or smoothing fur, it is also learning the shape of its own body through repeated action. Grooming can be soothing, regulating, and familiar. It belongs not just to hygiene, but to comfort and routine. And because grooming often begins in the context of being cared for by the mother, it also carries a quiet link between dependence and independence. What was first received from another body slowly becomes something the kitten can do for itself. Basic bodily functions change in a similar gradual way. In the earliest days, very young kittens need the mother's licking to stimulate these functions because they are not yet ready to manage them alone. But by around 3 weeks, that dependence begins to change. The body becomes more capable. Control improves. One more piece of daily life moves from being fully assisted to being partly self-managed. This is a small change, but an important one, because it is part of the larger story of kittenhood becoming more self-directed. Litter habits often begin to form around this same broad stage, and in many kittens, they come fairly naturally. Cats have a strong instinctive side when it comes to burying waste, which is one reason litter training can seem almost surprisingly easy compared with training in some other animals. Of course, the kitten is still learning, and environment still matters. But the behavior often fits the cat body well from the start. It feels less like forcing a new habit onto the animal, and more like giving an instinctive habit the right setting to appear. That is part of what makes these everyday routines so interesting. They may seem small, but they reveal a lot about what kittenhood really is. It is not only a time of big milestones. It is also a time when ordinary life becomes more organized. Eating gets more varied. Cleaning becomes more intentional. The body becomes more manageable from the inside. The kitten starts taking part in routines that once happened almost entirely around it, rather than through it. And yet, even as the kitten becomes more capable in these everyday ways, it is still fragile in ways that matter. The body is stronger than before, but not finished. The habits are forming, but the systems behind them are still developing. So this growing independence has to be understood alongside a continuing vulnerability, because kittenhood is always both at once. Even as kittens become more active, more coordinated, and more visibly capable, they are still living inside systems that remain delicate. That does not need to be understood in a frightening way, but it does need to be understood clearly. Kittenhood is a period of rapid growth, and rapid growth depends on stability. A kitten does not need a complicated list of things in order to do well. It needs a few important conditions to be met again and again. Warmth, hydration, nutrition, hygiene, and timely care when something seems off. In many ways, the fragility of kittenhood can be understood through those simple needs. Warmth is one of the first and most important of them. Very young kittens are poor at regulating their own body temperature, especially in the earliest weeks. Their bodies are small, their reserves are limited, and they lose heat more easily than older cats. That is why so much of early kitten life is built around warmth. The mother's body provides it. Littermates provide it. The nest or resting area helps hold it. Warmth is not just comfort for a young kitten. It is one of the foundations of staying stable enough to grow. When body temperature drops too low, the effects reach beyond feeling cold. A chilled kitten may struggle to nurse properly, and digestion can become less effective. Energy use becomes less efficient. Weakness can build. Even the immune system can be affected when the body is under that kind of stress. This is why kitten care follows such a calm but important rule. Warmth first. Before a very young kitten can fully make use of food, the body needs enough warmth to function properly. That fact alone tells us something important about early life. Basic survival is not only about getting food into the body. It is also about keeping the body in a state where it can use that food. Another quiet but very useful sign of kitten health is daily weight gain. Because kittens grow so quickly, steady gain tends to be one of the clearest signs that things are going well. A kitten that is warm, nursing properly, digesting well, and developing as expected will usually show that progress on the scale. And because change happens so fast in early life, failure to gain weight can be one of the earliest signs that something is not quite right. In that sense, weight is not just a number. It is a kind of daily summary of how the body is coping with all its needs at once. Immunity is fragile in a different way. Early on, kittens receive immune support from the mother through colostrum and early milk. That support matters a great deal because the kitten's own immune system is still immature. But those maternal antibodies do not last forever. Over time, they fade, and that creates an important transition. The kitten is slowly moving from borrowed protection toward building more of its own. That is one reason vaccine timing matters so much in kittenhood. Care schedules have to work around this fading support, aiming to protect the kitten during a period when the body is still becoming more capable of defending itself. Hydration and hygiene belong in this picture too. A young kitten does not have much room for error when it comes to fluids, energy, or cleanliness. The body is small, and small bodies can shift quickly. That does not mean kittenhood should be seen as a constant emergency. Quite the opposite. Most of the time, healthy kitten care is calm and repetitive, but it works best when the basics are respected. Warm bodies, clean spaces, reliable feeding, fresh water when age appropriate, quiet observation, prompt attention when something feels off. Kitten vulnerability is real, but it is often best understood through consistency rather than worry. That may be the gentlest way to frame this stage. A kitten is fragile not because it is doomed to struggle, but because it is still under construction. The body is building its systems while relying on a very steady set of outside supports. The needs are simple, but they matter deeply. And once we understand that, it becomes easier to widen the frame a little. Because the delicate little house kitten is not alone in this pattern. Across the cat family, young felines begin in ways that are strikingly similar, carrying the same mixture of dependence, growth, and slowly developing skill. A house kitten can feel like such a familiar little creature that it is easy to forget what family it belongs to. It sleeps in blankets, chases toys across the floor, and grows up in kitchens, living rooms, and quiet corners of human homes. But if we widen the frame just a little, the kitten begins to look different. It is still a domestic animal, of course, but it is also part of a much older feline design. The tiny pounce, the crouch before a leap, the intense focus on a moving object, all of these belong not only to the house cat, but to the wider cat family. This is one of the most interesting ways to think about kittens. A domestic kitten is small, modern, and familiar. Yet its early development follows a pattern shared by many young felines. Wildcat young, including tiger cubs and other feline cubs, also begin life in a dependent state. They are born needing warmth, milk, protection, and time. Their senses do not arrive fully ready. Their movement is limited at first. Their abilities unfold gradually. In that way, the little house kitten sleeping in a basket and the cub of a larger wildcat are not as different in early life as their adult forms might lead us to imagine. Across the cat family, the early story often begins in a similar way. The young are born unfinished. Eyes may be closed at first. Hearing develops over time. Mobility starts in weak, uncertain motions before becoming more purposeful. Feeding begins with milk, then later shifts toward more independent eating as the body matures. The details vary by species, of course, and the pace can vary too. But the broad pattern remains recognizable. Dependence comes first. Skill comes later. Growth bridges the distance between the two. This shared pattern helps make sense of domestic kitten behavior. The crouch of a kitten before it springs at a toy is not just a cute little action invented inside the home. It is part of a much older feline movement pattern. The same is true of chasing, stalking, pouncing, and the strong attraction to motion. These behaviors make more sense when we see them not as isolated domestic habits, but as early expressions of the cat body itself. The kitten does not need to be wild to carry that pattern. It only needs to be feline. That does not mean a house kitten is simply a tiny wildcat in disguise. Domestic life changes a great deal. Human homes shape behavior, safety, food access, and the daily rhythm of life in ways that are very different from life in the wild. But the deeper point still holds. The house kitten is not separate from the rest of the cat family. It is one branch of it, shaped by domestication, but still carrying older biological patterns inside a much softer and more familiar setting. In fact, part of what makes kittens so captivating may be this mixture of the ancient and the ordinary. A kitten can seem completely at home in human life, while still revealing small flashes of an older design. A toy dragged across the floor becomes prey. A quiet room becomes a hunting ground. A cardboard box becomes an ambush point. These things can seem funny or charming, and they are, but they are also reminders. The domestic kitten is not only a pet in development, it is also a feline in development. Thinking this way adds scale without taking us away from kittens themselves. It helps us see that the everyday kitten is part of a much larger story, one that stretches across species and across time. The softness of the fur, the roundness of the face, and the tiny size may feel very domestic and very close to us. But the body underneath still belongs to an old family line built around patience, precision, and motion. So a house kitten can be understood as a tiny modern branch of a very old design. It grows up near people, but it does not grow up outside biology. It carries both the familiarity of home and the inheritance of the cat family at once. And from here, it makes sense to return to the present. Because if kittens carry an old feline pattern inside them, much of how that pattern unfolds today is shaped by something more recent and more human. Human homes, voices, routines, and care now play a major role in how many kittens grow, learn, and come to feel safe in the world. For many kittens, the world is no longer shaped only by the mother, the litter, and instinctive development. It is also shaped by people. Human homes, human voices, human routines, and human touch can all become part of kittenhood very early. This matters because kittens are not only growing physically during this stage, they are also learning what kind of world they live in. They are learning what is ordinary, what feels safe, what can be trusted, and what belongs to daily life. In that sense, human care does not just support kittenhood from the outside. It helps shape the experience of kittenhood from within. One of the most important parts of this is the early socialization window. During this period, kittens are especially open to forming lasting impressions about people, sounds, handling, and routine. A kitten that is gently exposed to calm voices, careful touch, ordinary movement, and stable daily patterns often learns that these things are normal parts of life. That may sound simple, but it has deep effects. A world that feels predictable is easier to explore. A hand that feels gentle is easier to trust. A home that feels steady is easier to relax in. This is why calm human touch matters so much. A kitten that is handled softly and respectfully may begin to understand that closeness with people is not something to fear. Hands become associated with warmth, food, lifting, comfort, and care rather than uncertainty. Voices become part of the background rhythm of life. Daily household sounds begin to feel familiar instead of alarming. Over time, all of this helps shape confidence. The kitten does not just tolerate human life, it begins to live comfortably within it. The home itself also plays a quiet but important role. A safe environment changes development in very practical ways. It provides warmth, shelter, reliable food, clean resting places, and protected space to move through. A kitten that grows up in a safe home has room to practice being a kitten. It can sleep deeply, eat regularly, explore without as much danger, and recover from small mistakes inside a protected setting. This does not remove all challenge from development, nor should it, but it gives the kitten a stable base from which normal growth can unfold. Enrichment matters here too. A good environment is not only safe, it is also interesting in gentle ways. Toys, soft surfaces, places to climb, mild novelty, different textures, and small spaces to enter and leave all help kittens practice curiosity and control. These features support movement, problem-solving, confidence, and body awareness. A kitten that has safe chances to investigate, climb, stalk, or test its balance is not only staying occupied, it is building skill. The environment becomes part of the learning process. It is also worth remembering that not all kittens have the exact same beginning. A mother-raised kitten and a bottle-raised kitten may have different early experiences, especially around bonding, comfort, and social learning. A mother-raised kitten receives not only milk, but also grooming, warmth, regulation, and constant body contact from the mother. A bottle-raised kitten may still grow beautifully, but human caregiving often has to carry more of that early role. That means caregiving style becomes especially important when the mother is absent. Consistency, warmth, calm contact, and careful timing matter even more, because more of the early structure of life depends directly on human support. What makes all of this so interesting is that human care shapes both body and behavior at once. The kitten is fed, protected, and kept warm, but it is also being taught, quietly, what daily life feels like. Safety is learned through repetition. Trust is built through repeated calm experiences. Confidence grows not from one dramatic moment, but from many small, ordinary ones. So human care does more than keep a kitten alive. It helps decide what kind of world the kitten thinks it lives in. Is the world gentle or harsh? Predictable or confusing? Safe enough to explore, or full of things to fear? Early care helps answer those questions before the kitten could ever put them into words. And even while people are helping shape that early world, kittenhood itself is already moving onward. The body is stretching, the face is changing, sleep is shifting, and independence is slowly increasing. The round, sleepy baby does not stay that way for long. Little by little, the kitten begins to grow beyond kittenhood itself. There comes a point in kittenhood when the changes are no longer only about opening up, but about stretching out. The very young kitten, with its round face, sleepy rhythm, and soft baby shape, begins to look different. Not suddenly, but gradually. The body gets longer, the legs seem less short, the face loses a little of its roundness, the movement becomes cleaner. The kitten does not stop being a kitten all at once. Instead, it slowly begins to look and feel more like a young cat. This stage can be easy to miss if you see the kitten every day, because the changes often happen in small steps. 1 week, the body still looks compact and baby-like. Then, before long, it seems leaner. The paws do not look quite so oversized anymore. The head sits differently on the body. The overall shape begins to look less like a soft little bundle and more like an animal built for movement. In some ways, this is the quiet opposite of the newborn stage. Early kittenhood is about systems coming online. Later kittenhood is about those systems becoming smoother, stronger, and more connected. Sleep is still a major part of life during this period, but the rhythm begins to shift. The extreme sleep-heavy pattern of very early kittenhood starts to ease. The kitten still rests a great deal, far more than most humans do. But wakeful time now becomes more active, more sustained, and more structured. Sleep is no longer almost the whole story. It is one part of a wider daily pattern that now includes more movement, more play, more exploration, and more independent behavior. Diet begins changing too, though the body is still growing quickly. Earlier in life, nutrition is almost entirely about construction. Everything is being built at once, and the body needs dense support for that growth. Later on, the kitten is still developing, but it is moving a little closer to maintenance as well. The body is still under construction, but not in quite the same all-consuming way as before. Meals are still important. Growth is still active. But the kitten is beginning to shift toward a body that is learning not only how to become, but how to continue. Coordination improves in a very visible way during this stage. Jumping becomes cleaner. Landings become more controlled. Climbing looks less like trial and error and more like intention. Chasing becomes faster, tighter, and more precise. The same body that once wobbled, bounced too far, or tumbled through motion now starts to show more of the balance and timing people associate with cats. It is still playful, still full of bursts of energy, but there is a new sharpness in the movement. The kitten no longer seems to be discovering every basic action for the first time. It begins to look like it knows what its body can do. There is a mental shift too. As kittens grow older, they often begin to feel more individual in a very noticeable way. They still carry a lot of playful energy, but they also seem to have clearer preferences, habits, and ways of responding. One kitten may become bold and curious, another more cautious and observant. One may seek out human contact often, another may be more independent before returning on its own terms. These differences are not created all at once, of course, but later kittenhood is often when personality feels easier to notice. The young cat begins to seem less like a general kitten and more like itself. This stage can feel especially interesting because it holds two things at once. The kitten is still young enough to seem soft, playful, and visibly unfinished. But it is also old enough to show the first stronger signs of adulthood. The baby shape has not completely disappeared, yet the adult cat is beginning to show through. For a while, both are present together. That gives later kittenhood a particular kind of beauty. It is not the beginning anymore, but it is not the end of the process either. It is a middle stage full of transition. And that transition is part of what makes kittenhood feel so brief. The round little animal that once slept nearly all day, depended on milk, and lived in a world of warmth and touch, begins to lengthen, strengthen, and separate from that earliest form. The change is natural, but it can also feel a little surprising because it happens so quickly. And perhaps that is one reason kittens leave such a strong impression on people. Their early life is not only delicate, it is temporary. We are not just looking at something small, we are watching a brief stage pass in real time. When people respond strongly to kittens, they are not only reacting to fur or small size, or the general idea of a baby animal. Something deeper is happening. Kittens seem to gather many of the features that humans are especially sensitive to noticing. Large-looking eyes, round faces, small noses, soft proportions, tiny movements, quiet sounds. All of these things can trigger what scientists often call a caregiving response. In simple terms, kittens are built in a way that makes them seem delicate, gentle, and worth protecting. Part of this comes from what is sometimes called baby schema. This refers to a group of infant-like features that tend to draw human attention and increase feelings of tenderness or care. A rounder face, bigger-looking eyes, and a smaller muzzle can all make an animal seem younger and more vulnerable. Kittens often carry many of these features very strongly, especially in early life. That does not mean humans are imagining their fragility. Kittens really are fragile in many ways, but their appearance also makes that fragility more visible to us. Their movements deepen that effect. A kitten does not move like a large animal, or even like a settled adult cat. It takes small steps. It makes sudden little leaps. It curls into sleep in soft shapes. It tumbles, pauses, studies, and reaches in ways that feel careful and unfinished. Even when kittens are energetic, they often seem delicate. Their bodies look as though they are still learning themselves, and people can sense that. A creature that is visibly still becoming tends to invite a different emotional response than one that already looks complete. Their sounds matter too. Soft mews, tiny cries, purring, and even the faint rustling of a small body moving through a blanket can make a kitten feel emotionally present. It does not need to be doing something dramatic. A kitten can simply exist nearby and still draw attention. That may be part of what makes them so compelling. They seem to fill a space gently. Their presence is light, but not empty. People feel them there. Domestication has likely strengthened this relationship over time. Humans and cats have lived near one another for a very long time, and over generations, cats became part of human daily life in ways that made emotional familiarity more likely. A kitten, then, is not just a young feline in the abstract. It is also a form that many humans are already prepared to respond to. The bond is biological in some ways, visual in some ways, and historical in some ways too. But perhaps the deepest reason kittens affect people so strongly is that they combine two things at once: visible fragility and visible becoming. When people look at a kitten, they are not only seeing something small, they are seeing a life in motion. They are seeing a body that is still unfolding, still organizing itself, still growing into its own balance, senses, routines, and habits. A kitten is not static. Even while resting, it feels temporary. It feels like a stage that will pass. And that gives kittenhood a kind of emotional brightness. The softness is real. The vulnerability is real. But so is the motion towards something else. A kitten is not only delicate, it is also on its way. Each week changes it. Each stage leaves something behind and brings something new forward. The newborn becomes the explorer. The explorer becomes the player. The player becomes the young cat. People may feel this without even naming it. Part of what touches them is not only what the kitten is, but what it is becoming. That may be why kittenhood feels so memorable. It is brief, expressive, and full of visible change. In one tiny animal, sleep, growth, instinct, play, dependence, and independence all exist together at once. The kitten carries the softness of early life and the first outline of the adult cat to come. And that is what makes kittenhood such a beautiful window to look through. For a short time, everything is still close to the beginning. The world is still new. The body is still learning. Warmth still matters deeply. Rest still fills most of the day. Play still looks like discovery. And through all of it, the kitten remains what it has been from the start. A small life in the act of becoming.